Right, I will keep my eye out for Councillor Ladwig, but you can go ahead. You have quorum.
Okay. Thank you very much, and welcome everybody to the regular meeting of council for the town of Gibsons for October 19, 2021, being held electronically as per Ministerial Order M192. We acknowledge this evening that we are meeting on the unceded territory of the Squamish Nation. And this time is 7:03. I'll call the meeting to order. Councillor Ladwig will be joining us. She's just transiting herself between her house and the office here, and will join us shortly, but we will proceed with the meeting. We have an agenda. I'd like to add one item to the agenda. I'd like to add 7.3, and it would be a verbal report from the Director of Infrastructure on the past weekend's rain event and any impacts that that had on the town's services and operations. So Mr. Newman will be prepared to do that. With that change in the agenda, is there any other additions? Councillor Kroll? No addition? Okay, you move the agenda as amended and seconded by Councillor Lumley. Thank you. All in favor? Thank you very much. We'll go on and proceed to adoption of the minutes. This is the minutes of the regular council meeting on October 5th, and recommendation minutes be adopted. Councillor Kroll, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Diandrade. Are you adopted? You seconded that?
I just want to say something. You mentioned 7.3, but I downloaded the last agenda. There's only 7.1, unless I have the wrong
hang on a
agenda.
second. Playing with different papers here. 7.
I may have the wrong
one.
It would be 7.3, Mayor, because it's under administration reports.
Yes.
It would be 7.3.
Yeah, well, hang on a second. Now I got 7.1 is Kirsten Rockman's report. And then it goes.
Oh, no, 7.2.
It would be 7.2. Yeah, make it 7.2. Thank you for that correction. In the previous agenda, it would have been 7.3.
That's correct.
So that's right. So yeah, so we'll get it right. Yeah. Okay. Seconder for adoption of the minutes, Councillor Diandrade. Thank you. All in favor? Thank you very much. Any business arising from those minutes, Council? No, see none. We'll go on to inquiries, and this will be the first of our 2 inquiry sections. This inquiry session deals with any items that are on the agenda tonight that the public would like to make us aware of, concerns about.
If there's one, oh, I see there are a couple. Just took me a moment to. Judith Bonkoff is coming over.
Thank you. Welcome, Judith.
Hi.
Hi.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Judith Bonkoff, 628 Glen Road. I just have a query about the agenda, the CAC part of the agenda, and that's coming up near the end. But since it's on the agenda, I can hopefully ask you a question. Okay. I'm a little bit concerned about it, and I'm a little bit confused. If you could tell me if this policy that you want to approve tonight, I have been following it sort of as it's been going along, although I was away this summer, so I might have missed something. And so I apologize if I've missed something. I know that Councillor Ladwig had asked for a comparison of the CACs that the new policy would bring in compared to what we were getting. And I don't know whether that was ever discussed or not as far as the comparison goes. But on just a few numbers of my own, I have come up with that the George, which of course hasn't been built yet, but how much it had to pay is actually more under the old policy than the new policy. Now, and also Eagle View. Okay, so the George, under the new policy would pay 120,000, and out of the old policy paid 256,480. So big difference. Now this is combining affordable housing and amenities. So I'm taking both numbers. The George is 156,000 and change, and 100,000 for the park. So that was 256. Those are the two CACs. And now under the new policy, if I'm not mistaken, it's $3,000 for an apartment. And there's 40 apartments, round figures 39. And the new policy will give you 120. Now, Eagle View would have been under, their old policy, what they were approved under is 420,000. The new policy will give you 332,000. Yeah, 332,000. So my point is, I know that the council has said we didn't get enough money for affordable housing. Well, I'm looking at this and going, well, you're going to get less. So how is that okay? And so that's where I'm wanting to know if council realizes that these charges are less than what Eagle View would pay now and what the George would pay now. Do you know that?
Yeah, I don't know that, and in that sense, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Okay, so that's why I just thought I would ask that question, because it's very obvious to me that we're not getting as much and we need more. So just for your consideration.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Other questions, Corporate Officer?
Yes, you have one more.
Thank you.
William Baker is moving over.
Thank you.
Okay, my my name's there at any rate. My
Yep.
video doesn't seem to be working. My question also addresses the community account, the CACs, and particularly 4.1.4 in the proposed bylaw. I like the idea, quite frankly, that there should be a negotiated approach to the CACs that will be received by the town, particularly if there's a larger development, and definitely at least a minimum of 50% of the lift and the value of that project. What I'm not clear on is in the near the very end of that section, it says examples of when an applicant may opt to use in an economic analysis include but are not limited to. My concern here is that it's really not clear. Is it the town's is the town opting to use this approach, or is it a right of the applicant to use an economic analysis? Because clearly they would only a developer would only use this economic analysis if they felt it was going to be less than the amounts that have been set out in the proposed bylaw of 3,000 or 4,000 a unit. So I'm just not clear on whether the language or the example that's used, it properly indicates what the intent here is. Is the town in charge of when we use a negotiated approach, or is the applicant? Because it says very clearly that when an applicant may opt to use, that tells me they have the right, and the town can't say no, we're happy with the existing one. And so maybe someone can clarify that for me.
Okay, thank you. We'll ask the Director of Planning to do that when that item's on the agenda. So,
Okay, thank you.
thank you. Other questions?
Yes, you have one more.
Okay, thank you.
Mary Catherine Anderson is joining you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Beamish.
Yes.
Hi, Town of Gibsons. I'm your neighbor on off the 101 in Area E, downstream of the Parklands culvert and the Moti riparian channel. My name's Mary Catherine Anderson. And
Mary Catherine, I'm just going to interject with you. This is an opportunity to ask a question, not
Yes.
make a presentation. So if you have a
Gotcha.
question about anything.
Thank you, Mayor Beamish.
Thank you.
I thought the following person's question was excellent, and it was also one of my own. With respect to bylaw 1175, I believe that's the one for where it goes into all of the town requirements regarding development. The same issue occurs with respect to stormwater management plan must consider the impacts of the development or subdivision on the water courses within the town, having regard to any applicable environmental development permit requirements, and general natural water courses include Charman Creek, Chester Creek. Anyway, there's many provisions within this around integrated stormwater management that the developers are required to supply or may supply. And it seems to be at the discretion of the director of infrastructure. And I have tried to access through the online portal the DPAs regarding both Westfield and Parklands, because both of them are directing their stormwater and continue to add on into the Moti culvert, breaking open the 101. So I'm going to call staff, but I would really like to be able to have access to know if appropriate elements have been filed in both of these developments packages. So that's my question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that will be to the Director of Infrastructure. And you may not get that response tonight, but you'll get that response subsequent to this meeting if it doesn't come in the conversation tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good
Thank
evening.
you. Thank you.
If there's anyone else who has a question, please raise your hand. I see no further hands raised, Mayor Beamish.
Thank you. We'll carry on with our agenda then. And the first item, I got to make sure I'm on the right page. One of my problems is I write all over my early agendas, and then when I get a new agenda, it doesn't have my notes on it. So then I got two agendas to look at. So I'll just turn pages on both of them. So the next one is the committee reports. 6.1 is the committee of the whole meeting of October 5th. And the recommendation first that the minutes of the committee of the whole meeting of October 5th be received. Councillor Kroll, thank you. Councillor Diandrad, thank you. All in favor of receipt? Thank you very much. The first report is from the Director of Finance, and it's a recommendation that the 2021 Grants of Assistance Round 2 awards be approved as follows, with $3,000 of funding being provided from the COVID-19 Community Grants Program. Garden Group at Quanah Senior Village, $2,000. The Mushroom Festival Society, $2,000. Society for Atmosphere Solutions, $1,500. Sunshine Coast Baseball Association, $2,000. Susan Sunbear and Amelia Bellion, Mother Bone Project, $1,000. Sunshine Coast Hospice Society, $1,000 for a total of $9,500. And the council want somebody to move that? Councillor Lumley, thank you. Councillor Kroll, thank you. All in favor? Thank you very much. Good to see that money going to go to use in the community. And then the survey, I'm just seeing here. Now we've got this on the agenda as well. So the recommendation, and then we have a report on the agenda, which we'll ask somebody to speak to. So the communications coordinators survey results that the section 411 of the new Community Amenity Corporation be updated to allocate CAC revenue as follows: 44% to the Town Affordable Housing Reserve Fund and 56% to the Town General Amenity Reserve. And that the new policy be replaced with a new Community Amenity Contribution Policy with amended CAC revenue allocations. I'm going to deal with the first part of that recommendation because the second part, as you'll notice, is actually 6.1.4. So that the first part of that recommendation is a result of the only result of the survey that recommends the allocation of 44% to the housing reserve and 56% to the general community amenity reserve. Would somebody care to move that? Councillor Ladwig, Councillor Kroll, further discussion on that part? This was a survey. We asked the people. We had over 300 responses, and this is what it boils down to. So all in favor of that? Thank you. Opposed? See none opposed, that passes. I'm going to ignore the next one, which I appreciate it did come out of the meeting, but I'm going to go straight to 6.1.4, which is a community amenity contribution policy, 3.14, and that it is in your agenda package. And I'm going to ask the Director of Planning to speak to that, bearing in mind the questions are asked this evening. Director of Planning.
Thank you, Mayor. So this policy provides an update to the existing community amenity contribution policy. It provides more clarity, transparency, and clear procedures and responsibilities for negotiating community amenity contributions. I'll share my screen just to make sure everyone's looking at the same policy. So it goes through the purpose, and the purpose of this policy is to offer guidance for the provision of CACs in the town of Gibsons. And as it says here, the CAC policy aims to be fair, reasonable, consistent, and transparent. So it goes through the definitions of what a CAC is, so an in-kind contribution made by a developer as part of a rezoning process. And it's intended to help offset the cost of providing amenities associated with new residential development that are seeking a change in use or density. Amenities will be funded through this process, and it lists the different types of amenities, the public benefits, and it includes but is not limited to affordable housing, civic facilities, plazas, pedestrian and cycling improvements, recreation facilities, art, heritage conservation, environmental enhancement, public art and parkland improvements. So then it goes into who pays the CACs, and this is the developer. The developer would pay, or whoever is applying for rezoning would pay their contribution. The policy goes into the revenue allocation. So this is what was just discussed. Once a CAC is offered, then 44% would go into the town's Affordable Housing Reserve Fund, and then the remainder 56% would go into the general Community Amenity Reserve Fund. The new, so all of this is new in terms of how it lays out what CACs are, who pays them, how they're paid, where the money goes. A big change is having these target rates in the policy. The previous policy encouraged CAC contributions, and it pointed to the Director of Planning to negotiate CACs based on Section 482 of the Local Government Act. That section of the Local Government Act talks about density bonusing for amenities, affordable housing and special needs housing. So it is a tool. So Section 482 of the Local Government Act is a tool for including amenities in zoning, but the previous policy did not speak to how to negotiate or what the parameters around the negotiation are. And so a big part of this project was to look at the cost of development, calculate all the hard and soft costs, and come to some target rates that are fair and transparent, so that when a developer calls the planning department and says, hey, we want to develop, we can share our policy with them and say, okay, well, these are going to be the target rates you're going to have to look at for the community amenity contribution. And these are based on on taking 50% of the land lift. So there's the different forms of development have different target rates. It also goes into the credit. So if you have an existing residential use on the property, you get a credit for what's there. So you would be paying a contribution for the added density that you're rezoning to. So these are just examples. 4.1.4 talks about the negotiated approach. So this approach would be specifically to an applicant. If the applicant says, hey, you know what, I'm rezoning to an apartment use and 3,000 per unit is way more than 50% of my land lift, and it's not reasonable, then they could opt out of that and go into a negotiated approach. So any developer could opt out of these target rates and go for a negotiated approach. The negotiated approach would be an economic analysis conducted at the applicant's expense, and it would be completed by a third-party consultant, an independent third-party consultant. And this is where the town would consider 50% of the increase in land value from existing zoning to be a reasonable balance between the need for CACs and a project's economic viability. This negotiated approach also speaks to where we would lean towards a negotiated approach. So there are target rates, but if there's an OCP amendment, for example, we would look at a negotiated approach because it's a more complex development. If there's a larger subdivision, so more than 10 lots, we would look at a negotiated approach. If it's a complex proposal, such as a phased development, we would look at negotiated approach, or where an applicant wishes to take this route, then we could always go to the negotiated approach. So what this policy does is it moves away from negotiating on a case-by-case basis for every rezoning, and it sets those target rates. But there is always the option to negotiate. When you go into negotiations, there's less clarity around it. The CAC exemptions are listed here as well. So not-for-profit organizations serving the community will not be expected to provide CACs. If it's 100% purpose-built rental projects, or mixed-use projects where the residential portion is 100% rental and the tenure is secured by a legal agreement, so typically a Section 219 covenant for 60 years or the life of the building, that would be exempt. And then council may, at its discretion, waive CACs at any point. So when do they apply? They apply for any rezoning application with residential use. And then it goes into the procedure. So it's up to the planning department to share this policy with developers. The planning department will provide a letter, a community amenity offer letter to council for consideration as part of the rezoning process. And in terms of responsibilities, it would be up to council to accept the offer. And it would be up to the director of planning to administer the policy. And then it also speaks about a review date. So it's every 2 to 5 years to review this policy, but council can amend it at any point and at any time. So there's an outline of what the policy speaks to. And now this would be an option for any questions I can answer or discussion to move towards adoption.
That's the question that was raised. One question was, is that how does this compare to what we've been doing currently in terms of the revenues that have been successfully negotiated?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we looked at some comparisons, and CACs are always negotiated, so it's hard to value exactly what was received. So when we look at Eagle View, for example, we got a financial contribution towards affordable housing. We got a financial contribution towards the park, towards Armours Beach. And then we also got some trail dedication. So we didn't we didn't put a value on the cost of the trail building or those other pieces. We've had CAC contributions in Upper Gibsons for the Soames Place, for example, where we set the sale price of those units, but the market ended up coming down and the set affordable housing rate ended up being market rate. So we lost out in a way. And then we've had trail dedications, we've had affordable housing contributions. It's been so many various contributions that we haven't actually put a monetary value on what they are. So it's hard to compare whether they're equal or whether we got more through the negotiated approach or less. But the intention of this project was to make it fair. So look at the numbers, look at the cost of development, and take a 50% contribution. I mean, if council is looking at this policy and feels that 50% is not enough, then council could decide, we'd rather take 75% and recalculate those numbers to take a larger profit or a larger contribution.
I'll turn to council for questions. Firstly, I mean, you've all seen this, and it's not a surprise, the fact that you did vote to put on the agenda and vote to approve it. But do you have any other questions of the Director of Finance at this time? Or Director, sorry, sounds like Director of Finance because it's all dollars. Director of Planning. Yeah.
It looks like Councillor Lemley has a question.
It's pretty excited.
Yeah.
This does not preclude us from negotiating with the developer on with respect to a rezoning application, correct?
No, it doesn't. So
yeah,
so
council could decide. I mean, my only thought is at some point there'll be no point in taking money because the town's not going to be buying up land or there'll be, as we get less and less land, council may decide on a development to say, well, we'd like 2 units for the Affordable Housing Society to manage, and we can still negotiate these kind of deals with developers, right? This doesn't preclude council from negotiating, right?
It doesn't, but it does set target rates. So, but it is up to council to accept the offer and to approve a rezoning. So it's intended to set a rate that council is comfortable with to accept as a community amenity contribution.
Could I make one suggestion for an amendment to this policy? And it's under 4.1.2, and it's CAC target rates. Could we title those as minimum target rates?
Yeah, I think that's.
So that they become true targets. In other words, okay, here's where we're starting from, but we actually want more on this project and over another project. So if we call this CAC minimum target rates, And every time we use the word target in there, we have the word minimum in front of it. Then it gives us some sense of this is a negotiation still to be had, still possible. And it opens it up because, as you say, Director, we have received other things. I think of the development on Park Road, for example. I know there was $75,000 there towards affordable housing, but there was also other aspects of sidewalk and things like that that were done by that project that had nothing to do with that project. And so I think if we could, I would be very comfortable if we were to put the word minimum target rates in there, and we look at the project and say, okay, here's what you can expect to pay, and depending upon what else you're asking for. Councilor Dindrat?
Thank you, Mayor. I think I agree. I fully support that. And I think on the negotiated approach, I don't mind the bullets and I don't mind the sentence, but I agree. The sentence, when an applicant may, it almost gives like it's the applicant that decides. And also, I remember we discussed that where the proposal is on the view protection, we would negotiate. It's not included here. I would like to include another bullet and also emphasize as a bullet, like the city can and should reserve the right to continue to negotiate on a specific rezoning, where the rezoning is either something not considered in the OCP or for CD zones. And I believe this I took from the former policy because that empowers council. Yeah, we would use this as a basis, but we have, because right now it's written that the applicant is making the decision. The applicant may opt. I don't know. It feels like it's up to the applicant. So these are my amendments. I would like to include where the proposed development is situated in a view protection area and in a CDA zone as well, which is a comprehensive development zone.
Councilor Lumley?
Like ultimately, I mean, there's a number of things you could obviously change. And again, one of them is probably 50% of the increase in value of land. I mean, developers could come in and increase the value of the land by, 1,000%, and we're going to take 50%. So, I don't know. I mean, it's the policy seems like an outline or like a starting point, but there just may not be enough information here to like kind of really set some fairly strict applications for like a developer. That's all. It seems almost too vague, a lot of the terms, like you're saying minimum. And then I'm saying, well, why 50% of the increase in land value? Like increase in land value to what? Like from what it was, like, if somebody buys a 2-bedroom tear down and builds an 8-plex, like there's a lot of things to consider. Like when somebody does a development, maybe sometimes 50% wouldn't be enough, or maybe it's too much, I don't know. I mean, I know we wanted to bring it back, but it's like, it's funny as you get into these things and you get deeper and deeper. Of course, you want the best thing for the town, and you don't want to dissuade or seem like you want asking for too much. But it's, I don't know. I think it just needs a little bit more detail. It seems a little vague to me, like on a couple of different levels. So that's my only thought.
I guess my big concern is that we're either going to have a policy or we're not going to have a policy. And the difficulty with this is we go out and we hire a consultant and we don't follow their advice, then we're still back to square one. And are we getting anywhere? What we had talked about last time at the committee of the whole meeting was that we put this forward. We were happy with it. Councilor Lumley, I appreciate, was not there. We put it forward to council for approval. and then we would review it based upon our experience with it. It'll never be right. I do think it some tweaks, and I think they're valid tweaks, but I think that starting over again doesn't make sense to me at this point in time. So I think that if you want to make some tweaks, if not, let's just ship it back to committee and let's talk about it, because tonight is just going to be too much work to try to get through it. So. But it'll never be right. I can assure you of that.
Mayor, it looks like Councillor Crowell and Councillor Ladwig have questions.
If you could stop sharing screen, please.
Oh, sorry about that.
I don't see the people anymore. Yeah, okay, sorry, there we are. So Councillor Ladwig, you had, yeah.
Well, I hate to do this because I like to move things along, but I do wonder if we should have one more conversation about this at COW, just to answer a few questions.
Okay, so let's have a motion.
That we defer this just to the very next COW meeting.
Yep.
A bit more fulsome discussion about it. I have to admit, one of the questions I had was around the 50% increase in land value from existing zoning. I don't understand what that's based on. Are we getting pro formas from developers and that's based on the final build out cost? Or is that just once it's rezoned?
Okay, okay. You got it. Somebody want to second that motion? Seconded. All in favor, referring it back to committee of the whole. Okay, thank you. Gone back. Okay. We'll move forward on the agenda. Find out where my agenda packages are. Okay. Sorry.
Sorry, can I just go back to that for 1 sec?
Yeah.
Would it be possible to make another motion that we ask staff to just come back with an example of how the previous policy would have compared to this, like to walk us through actual numbers? Would that be possible?
And you want to give them an example? You want to tell them specifically what project you want to look at?
Well, I don't even know that I want to pin. I don't know if that's appropriate.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that's. It could be a made-up project. I just don't know if it's appropriate to actually use.
That would be in a negotiation. So,
Eagleview Heights. Eagleview Heights.
Eagleview Heights. Okay.
Sure.
Come back with example on Eagleview Heights. See how it works. Councillor Crowell.
All I was going to mention was, and it's with reference to the comment about revenue, is that in the previous CACs, it was anything over 10 units that was subject to the CACs, whereas this new agreement is any new, even if it's a single building. So because we're probably not going to be looking at as many big projects, this was encompassing the individual projects that came along. So just for clarification on that, because I think a lot of people missed that point.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I
think one thing to be aware of too is that the province likes certainty with development. And even though they allow for community amenities contributions, I am aware there's questions about whether or not that policy should continue because different land grabs are happening. We want this, we want that, we want this. And the property owners at some level talk to their politicians as well. So that you got to be careful that you don't bankrupt somebody or make it difficult to develop, and then we have nothing because that's just an amendment to the legislation. Okay, we'll carry on to the 6.2, and this is from the committee of the whole today. Recommendation of 6.21 that neighbors be notified of the date of council's decision on the issuance of a development variance permit to vary section 11.1.2.1 of the subdivision and development servicing and stormwater bylaw number 1175 to allow for new distribution wiring related to hydro infrastructure and communication infrastructure to be installed overhead instead of underground at 313 Headlands Road on condition this overhead wiring be contained within the property boundaries of 313 Headlands Road. Somebody want to make that recommendation? Councillor Crowell, Councillor Lumley, further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you. That's approved. Thank you. And thank you, Kirsten. Administration reports. We have Kirsten Rockins, planner for flood exemption and setback variance decisions for retaining wall, porch and deck additions for 466 Marine Drive.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll present it on behalf of Kirsten.
Thank you.
So the purpose of this report is to obtain a decision on both the flood exemption and the requested variances at 466 Marine Drive. So the application for the flood exemption was to allow a landscape retaining wall and second-story deck on the water side of the existing non-conforming home. The variances are to the side yard setbacks and lot cover to permit the new deck and extension off the roof over the front porch on Marine Drive. So the application was referred to the fire department, building department, and infrastructure department with no concerns, provided that a tree next to the front porch is not impacted. So letters were sent to neighbors within 50 meters of the property. 4 letters were received from neighbors and 1 phone call was received, all in support of the application and the improvements that it would allow the property to have. Letters are included on the agenda. The flood exemption was supported with a geotechnical report declaring the proposed improvements safe for the use intended. So before council makes a decision on the variance, the mayor may provide an opportunity to any member of the public to provide comments to be heard by council. If council approves the variances and the flood exemption, the owners may proceed with a building permit. If council denies the applications, the proposed renovations would not proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. And before we consider the further recommendations, I'd offer an opportunity for anybody affected by the proposed variance for 466 Marine Drive to speak to council and have an opportunity to be heard on your concerns.
Mayor Beamish, I do not see any hands raised.
Okay, thank you. So then, council, the recommendation is that the exemption to the flood provision part 4.112 of the zoning bylaw be granted to permit the proposed deck replacement and landscape retaining walls within the 15-minute flood setback from the natural boundary of the sea at 466 Marine Drive, subject to conditions outlined in the geotechnical report by Ground Up Geotechnical dated June 30, 2021, and registration of a Section 219 Safe Harbor covenant to the property title in favor of the town of Gibsons, and that the following variances be granted to 466 to permit construction of a proposed deck and front porch roof extension. Vary part 14.6.2 of the zoning bylaw to reduce the south interior side lot setback from 10.5 meters to 0.8 meters to permit extension of the home's existing roof line over the front porch. Vary part 4.6.2 of the zoning bylaw, reducing the north interior side yard setback from 10.5 meters to 4.5 meters to permit the proposed northeast side deck. And vary part 14.5 of the zoning bylaw to increase the maximum lot cover from 25% to 36%. First of all, a motion to receive the report. Thank you, Councilor Crowell, Councilor Dingrad. And secondly, would somebody care to make those motions that are in the package? Councilor Ladwig, Councilor Crowell. Any further discussion, council? Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you. That's passed. Thank you very much. So 7.2, this is where I was wanting the Director of Infrastructure to give us a report on the water situation as experienced this past weekend, and perhaps a little bit about drainage in general, if you could. Director of Infrastructure.
Oh, thank you, Mayor Beamish. I don't know if my camera's coming on. There we go. Yeah, this weekend we had, I haven't heard official amounts of water or rainfall that we received. However, we're kind of in the region of around 120 millimeters to 150 over the weekend. So that was fairly significant. I also do not know at this point as to what frequency of storm that represents. As you may be aware, storms are, rainfall or events are rated as, 1 to 2 years or 1 in 5 or 1 in 10. And just on average, what that means is that, excuse me, a 1 in 10 year storm would occur on average once every 10 years. Regardless, that was a fairly significant amount of rainfall. Thanks to Daniel and his crew, we were very well prepared for the storm. We had obviously we were anticipating it. Lots of inspections were done on our culvert and drainage system, and that certainly did us well in the storm. Probably the most significant impact from that rainfall was at the wastewater treatment plant. And anytime that we have storm events, we have what's called I&I, which is inflow and infiltration into our sanitary system. And that's where water is either directly connected, like a storm system is directly connected to our sanitary system, which is inflow. And then infiltration is where perhaps some of our older pipes have cracks or joint separation, and you can get infiltration. And we had, I believe, in excess of double the amount of water coming into the plant that we would on a normal dry day, which is not unusual for a storm event. However, because of the intensity of this storm, it certainly kept our operators on their toes. However, we were able to manage that inflow at the plant, thanks to the efforts of our staff. We run an annual program, which is it's our annual flushing program, I think is the title of it. But what we do with that flushing program is for both our sanitary and our storm, we flush the system, so get rid of debris in the system, and that can include roots, for example, that make their way in through cracks in the system. And we also video them, so we camera the lines, and the camera operators are looking for deficiencies or imperfections in the system where infiltration or inflow may occur. And then another thing that we do on the sanitary system is smoke testing, where you put a non-toxic smoke down the system, and then if you, for instance, see smoke starting coming out of the eaves or the eavesdrops of your house, that would indicate that there's a cross connection between the storm and the sanitary. So we run an annual program. Due to staffing challenges, we haven't run that this year, and we didn't run it last year. But we're currently preparing the documents to put that out to tender as we speak. There was some improvements that were needed on one of the development sites, and that was also completed with a combination of both the town staff and the developers' crews. And we had a few isolated incidents as well, but as I say, I really appreciate the efforts that were put in by the public works crews to make sure that the call outs were at a minimum.
Can you speak to the area on the west side of town?
Are we talking the like Parkland area, you mean?
Yeah, I'm talking about water that comes into the town, through
Yeah,
the
certainly.
town, and from the town.
Yep. So the area along Reed Road flows down, I would say probably roughly from Park Road. It flows down towards Payne from the town side as well as the ministry side. So the ministry has the main ditch on that side of on their side of the road. And that flows down towards Payne Road. We also have water flowing from the regional district north in general from Reed Road coming down towards that corner and other locations along that route that flow to Chester Creek. And so if you were to stand at the corner of Reed and Payne Road during a storm event, you will see a tremendous amount of water coming from the regional district into the town. That flows along Payne Road. It goes into an enclosed system and then west along Highway 101 and then goes into Chester Road. The area along Highway 101 just west of IGA Mall frequently floods there, and that's due to an undersized culvert of the ministries. And but a significant amount of water flows into the town and back out, and that leads to Chester Road. Parkland, all 4 phases back in, it was somewhere between 2009 and 2011. A covenant was put on those properties that they were to exceed our subdivision development bylaw, which states how much water is to be retained on the site. So typically when you have a property develop, you have what's called pre-development flows. So how much was flowing off that property before the development occurred, and then post-development, how much water flows after. And typically the 1 in 10 year has to be retained on site and then released at a less damaging rate. In Parkland, we've actually exceeded that back in 2009, somewhere around 2009 to 2011, and a covenant was put on there to retain the water up to the 1 in 100 year storm. And so the pond that you see by the Parkland Reservoir, as well as the new one just north of the tennis courts, that retains a 1 in 100 year storm. And then it releases at a 1 in 2 year rate. And what that means is there's a calculation for the size of an orifice in the drain pipe that leads out of the pond. And that orifice is sized so it releases at a 1 in 2 year rate. And the pond level will gradually build up as rain increases, and continually just release that at the less damaging 1 in 2 year rate. So as I say, that exceeds the town's bylaws. And so flows from the Parkland development have stayed at a 1 in 2 year rate ever since the project commenced.
And what happened there this weekend?
Everything it was still, the ponds would have been filling. They were retained that storm event and were releasing the storm at the 1 in 2 year rate. So basically, any rainfall that you see roughly every couple of years, like a particularly heavy rainfall every couple of years, that's what it was releasing it at. Not in, and although I don't know the frequency of that storm yet, it was more than likely greater than a 1 in 2 year. Most of the water that you see coming down that channel along Payne Road is from outside of town boundaries.
Councillor Ladwick had a question regarding B&K. There's a pipe there that was not getting any water through it. What would that pipe be from?
The B&K road, the logging road?
No, this is B&K nursery.
Oh, I do not know. because all the drainage from that is north of the highway comes down to the highway and then flows east on the north side of the highway. Nothing crosses over onto Pratt Road. It all
Okay.
heads down the other direction.
The channel, right?
But I'll have a look at the culvert that might, that exists in the area of the B&K soils, just to see if it might be, for catch basins along the south side of the road. I don't know. I would have to look at our GIS for that information.
Councillor Ludwig?
Yeah, I would really appreciate seeing the GIS report from that, because I have to say it really seems like the culvert coming out of IGA is at capacity or overloaded, and the culvert coming out at the B&K soils, like Mayor Beamer said, is bone dry. And so don't get me wrong, I understand digging up that intersection would be terrible, but it seems like it's a missed opportunity to be capitalizing on the ditch that runs down Pratt, because it's just bone dry in the middle of a big storm event. And it's like, meanwhile, this other culvert right over there is just flooding out. And so
Yeah,
I'd like to talk to Highways about what that's all about.
I'd be speculating at this point, to be honest with you, but I would strongly suspect that water ultimately ends up in the creek anyway. And then obviously draining from the town and redirecting it down Pratt would require collaboration with the ministry. But I'll look in that area, and I can certainly provide a little bit more information if you like.
Good. With the water, I mean, what we're seeing is a lot of development and a lot of weather change. I was up above the town today. I mean, at the corner of Keith Road and Cemetery Road, there's now a big construction site, development site. All the trees have been removed, and new construction going there, and it's just a big construction area. And the developments that have happened on the west side of Payne Road up there are also just houses where there used to be fields and land. So there's a lot of development happening north of the town. There's a lot of development happening in the town. And I think that what we need to do is talk to the SCRD, the Ministry of Transportation, and ourselves, and take a look at what that long-term impact is, because it's obviously has the potential to affect downstream from us. And we operate on the principle of do no harm. If we're doing something, we want to make sure that we're doing no harm, but we are transiting water through the town from the regional district back into the regional district. And that's one thing that we have no control over, is that particular water. So in a big event like this, it has to be looked at as to say, okay, how does that happen? And how are they managing that water once it gets back into their jurisdiction? Because it's always gone there. This is not new. So it's how are they managing it once it gets back in that jurisdiction? Because if it's not flowing properly, that is something they need to look at. Councillor Ludwig?
Well, and I thank you, Mayor Beamish. I really appreciate you raising this, because I think we also need to have a bit of a conversation about concentrating all this flow into one or two streams the way we are. When I look at the ditch down Gibsons Way, from a salmon perspective, during a flow like this, you'd wash out every salmon egg that ever had a chance of ever spawning in there. When I look at that creek on off of Pratt that I just walked on the weekend, any kind of salmon bearing ability in there would be washed out. And when I look at the ditch on Pratt, like I just said, I feel like part of our planning needs to be about letting water just spread out during these high flood events. It might very well, like the Director of Infrastructure just said, end up in the creek eventually, but we need to disperse how it happens and spread it out so that it happens more slowly and more controlled. So I do think we need to think about how we're directing all this flow, because it's far more than I think maybe we planned on originally or whatever. I don't know, but it's pretty intense.
Dave?
Yes, I agree with Councillor Ladwick, especially because these streams and creeks that we have do cross jurisdictional boundaries, and we can't be operating in isolation of each other, and staff are having conversations with opportunities for these. Typically, they're fringe area agreements or what have you, but this is a good example of one that I'll make sure is brought up at our next meeting that we have with the regional district. Although having said that, drainage, I believe, is largely the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. Regardless, there's still development approvals and so on that occur. But this is something that we can't just look at the town of Gibsons in isolation. We have water flowing into our town and then out. We have water originating from our town and out. And I believe as well, and something that we're moving towards is that projects such as the White Tower Pond are something that's going to be really important, as well as the ponds that we put in at Parkland in order to minimize that that increase to flow. And that's great for Parkland in this case, is that you know, we've planned ahead for that, but it's I'm not saying it's just not going to be as effective if people upstream or development requirements upstream aren't similar to ours.
Yeah.
So definitely some jurisdictional discussions would be very beneficial and get ourselves on the same pages on these.
Good, thank you. Councilor D'Andrade?
Just a clarification, because I read the reports, but it's a little bit hard for me to follow up when you say the north side and it's hard for me to picture. I know Mrs. Anderson mentioned that there was cement and oil downstream her property. So this is coming from the town. And then there's also mentioned that, I just want to clarify if so all the drainage coming from Parkland, is it going to this ditch that was just overflow before, right? No, we are not even talking about the event the past week, because the problem has been ongoing. But I just want a clarification. The water that's coming from Parkland, I understand that there's a lot of water that comes from Reed, as the director of infrastructure explained. But the water that drains from Parkland, where is it going?
It drains to the ponds first. So that's an important point not to miss. And then from those ponds, it does drain into that system. And the ponds would be showing evidence of oil, if any oil or what have you was originating at Parkland. In fact, that would be a pretty big concern to see oil slick or whatever on those ponds up there. So in an event like that, the amount of water coming off Parkland, I don't want to say it will be insignificant, but the flows from other areas is far more significant than Parkland, because, as I say, we're only flowing at a 1 and 2 year rate.
Mm-hmm. Dave, whose responsibility is to repair that ditch along Park Road or Payne Road there now that was scoured out?
Good question. Right at this point, that is technically kind of a construction zone. So chances are the developer will have to be, the Parkland developer will have to be dealing with that, and will be revegetating that ditch. So timing is unfortunate, because the widening of the ditch, as well as the slight relocate or the realignment of that ditch, the vegetation had to be pulled out to move it over. That ditch is going to be revegetated to ensure that scouring is minimized in the future.
Yeah, and just be clear, that's the water that comes from the regional district comes through at that point, and that's what's
correct.
Scoured out that ditch.
That was by far the most damaging water that we had was coming from the regional district into the town.
Yeah. Councilor D'Andrade?
Thank you. So just based on, the director just explained that the water from Parkland is flowing to the ponds. So what, in relationship to all this overflow that's going to Chester, so just this segment, so what's the percentage If you can.
Honestly, I could not tell you, because I think that one of the things that we would be part of this interjurisdictional study or cooperation would be a study of the catchment areas going down into Chester Creek. So, and part of the reason why it's very difficult for me to answer, if we were talking about a 1 and 2 year storm, it will be a little bit easier to answer because we're releasing at a 1 and 2 year rate. So, Parkland is releasing at the same rate as anybody else because it's a 1 and 2 year storm. However, when you have a storm like this and Parkland is still releasing at that lower 1 and 2 year, and we're looking at these other areas that are basically releasing at a 1 in 10 year, 1 in 50 year, whatever that storm event was, very, very difficult to say how much originated from Parkland. But it's safe to say that the majority of the water was not from Parkland.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Ladwig, do you have a last point and we'll move on? Okay. Thank you, Dave. Thank you for the update. But I think we do need to look to the future and some of these things and look and see how the development above the town is being managed as well. And that will be part of that conversation we'll look for have on the 3rd of November if Minister of Transportation agrees to come to that meeting, so that we can have that conversation. And again, it's looking at how we can work together to come up with some solutions that on a number of areas relative to the land. So it's good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to council reports, item 8. And I'll find my notes, but in the meantime, if there's somebody else who'd like to go forward with the report, Councilor Crowell.
Thank you, Mayor Beamish. On the 6th of October, and there is something in the reading file from the Ministry of the Environment with regard to the single-use plastics seminar that was held, and both Mayor Beamish and I attended it. That has been forwarded to council, the information out of that meeting, so it's sort of good to be aware of. October 7th, I attended a climate caucus meeting, which again got into many of the things we've just been talking about, stormwater management and things like that. From the 8th to the 11th, it was Thanksgiving mode. And I'd like to extend sincere thanks to all the volunteers who came out and helped us with the Thanksgiving dinners at the Gibsons Legion. Kudos to the culinary department at Elphinstone who partnered with us once again and participated. Also, SuperValue really stepped up to the plate. In the past, we've had the support of Jared Wanamaker with these Christmas dinners and Easter dinners, and sadly, Jared's no longer with us, but I think in his memory, the SuperValue staff really stepped up to the plate, and we're just, can't even begin to measure the gratitude that we need to extend to them. But the volunteers were great. In Gibsons, I believe we served something like 440 meals, 28 turkeys, 30 pounds of chicken breast, 300 pounds of potatoes, on and on. And it seemed to be really well received. Into the next week, I have to extend my sincere thanks to Michelle Lewis and CAO Mark Brown. We discovered with the city's race to zero that there was a deadline of the 14th if we were to be included in the announcement in Glasgow in November, and we had to have the information in by the 14th. So Michelle and Mark and I worked to get it, so we will be included in that. To that end, I'd also like to acknowledge staff. SFU are doing a seminar which is called Gibsons to Glasgow. And it's on the 28th of October at SFU. And, once again, Gibsons is on the map with respect to our climate initiatives. Oh, then there was the Climate Caucus Summit on the 15th of October. And there was a couple of the things that came up in it with donut economics, which was, is something I think is really worth having a look at. And the other thing was Indigenous Climate Futures. And it was a panel with First Nations and addressing climate issues and moving forward, balancing climate and reconciliation. So, and then this week it was the business walk. And it was, you may have seen in the paper, there was people voted on their favorite businesses, and a group of us went around, interviewed the recipients of the awards and other businesses in the community, sort of like the walk we did a couple of years ago. But very positive feedback from a lot of the business people in the community. And that's about it for me.
Others? Councilor Dindrat?
Thank you, Mayor. I attended the seniors planning table, and it was a meeting that they just came up with from a self-evaluation. They have been going on for 6 years now, and the evaluation was quite positive, as you know, they act as a think tank. They have even influenced federal policy at one point. When the Ministry of Seniors, I believe, came here to visit the group at Seychelles Senior Center. But the reviews was quite positive, as more, I think it created really this sense of all the organizations that work with seniors and emergency and health issues. They now know more about each other, what everybody's doing, collaborating in this regard. So it was a very positive review. I believe the planning table will continue for a while. And another interesting thing, a lot of the conversation was about emergency preparedness. So they also working with, actually the fire chief was there, talking about the program, and they talk about Fire Smart, and it's just interesting how all this is merging, right? The climate change, the Fire Smart, and there was a big discussion of the heat dome as well, and Vancouver Coastal Health is really working closely, because as council know, there was an excess of deaths, huge during this specific time. So anyways, it was, they will continue to do follow-ups. I'm quite excited that, somehow the emergency, it's encompassing all these fields, and perhaps we can have some resource savings in that too, right? So for example, when we do the Fire Smart, that neighborhoods will be engaged in looking at their property, perhaps they can even look at other protection about heat waves and things. So that's the beginning with regards to these specifics, but it was a very positive review. So
thank you. For my part, the one thing was to follow up on October 13th from one of our UBCM contacts, this on policing. Councillor Crowell, Mark Brown, CIO, and myself, we met with Sergeant Don Newman of the Sunshine Coast Detachment and Superintendent Julie Dedecker of the RCMP Client Liaison group. Talked about the changes that are going to occur in 2022 as we reach population of 5,000. They believe it to be a given. Their analysis identifies that this is going to happen, but we still won't know until the census report is in, I believe, February, and we'll be anxiously awaiting those numbers. In anticipation, we're looking at different models. One model they're looking at is a start-stop model where members will actually start their shift in Gibsons and end their shift in Gibsons, see how that will work. we are still going to have some responsibility financially, obviously for those members, but also for the support staff and a percentage of support services that comes out of Seashelt. The biggest issue and biggest concern I have in the whole thing is we did a study in 2019 that identified numbers for us and projected numbers. Since then, the RCMP has settled their contract, and the retroactive cost of that contract compounded annually is about 24%. So whatever our number was that we were using in 2019 as dollars, we'll have a 24% increase to it based upon the recent contract settlements with the RCMP members. So that's one thing we're going to be very concerned about. We are talking about a joint consultation with the community sometime early next year, talk about the kind of policing they'd like to see in the community. We talked strongly about volunteer programs that could be put in place in different things, and different models. So that's the start of that conversation, arising directly of our conversation at UBCM. And it was a good meeting. I appreciated that Council Crowell was able to attend. The other thing I want to talk is the next follow-up from the UBCM is the water dialogue, the watershed meetings on November the 3rd. That was a commitment that we made with the Ministry of Forests that we were not going to accept inaction. We wanted to actually move forward. So the first part of that is going to be a dialogue where we're going to talk about what is happening in the watershed, who's doing what. We have the Source to Sea project. The SCRD has a watershed study going on. We have well work going on. We have development. We have other projects that are occurring in the watershed. What kind of legislation is around to protect the aquifer? One of the problems we have with an aquifer is that we don't see it. We don't touch it. We don't throw stones or skip stones over the water and enjoy it. It just exists under the land. And when it's out of sight, out of mind, we tend to forget it's there. And so the town of Gibsons has some fairly rigorous development requirements around aquifer protection. Those don't exist above Reed Road. So that the development that's occurring there, I was up there on Gilmore Road tonight. There's 73 RV sites on septic fields up on Gilmore Road, on top of the aquifer, on top of within the recharge area. All of these things have the potential to cause damage in the future. And we're not saying they shouldn't be there. We're just saying that if they are there, what decisions were made in terms of risk assessment when they were developed, what mitigations were put in place to ensure that they do no harm to the land or downstream. What are the logging plans? How will District 1313 impact the watershed, impact the runoffs? All of these things have to do with this relatively small wedge of land starting at the top of Mount Elphinstone and ending up in our waterfront. And we rely on as our greatest natural asset. We're doing nothing outside the district to protect it, and we need to do more. So that's the whole purpose of this conversation, is to start that conversation. And hopefully it'll lead to some further work and studies, or maybe the studies are being done and we're not being appraised of them. What are the results of the studies that are being done? So that's what we're going to be coming together for on the 3rd of November. I've blocked out approximately 3-hour time frame. It may not take that much. We have a lot of interest in it, mainly because water is interesting. And now we have stormwater that's interesting. That is all also coming off the land. And so that we need to consider all these factors. So is the stormwater coming down because it's not recharging up above as much as it should? We don't know what's happening there. So those are questions we can ask, and questions that hopefully now I've got a commitment from Alan Johnsrud from Ministry of Forest to be there. He's looked in the files. He finds no watershed protection active application on our part. He says that even though we did apply, and he finds that there are some watershed protection designations up there that are due to expire in 2022, and they are ministry designations. So things that we need to look at, and it's very timely that we be talking about this. So I hope you're all able to attend and participate. So certainly the community is interested, and the invitation list was very broad. And so that there'll be individuals and organizations and industry. We made sure that the industry on the land was invited to be there as well. So we'll see who comes to the table. So that's my report. There were other things. I was on the business walk. I've attended other meetings, but these are the important things. So anything else council wants to add on the council reports? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to correspondence. And first of all, a motion to council receive the reading file for the week ending October 4th. Councillor Kroll, Councillor D'Andrade, anything arising from that reading file the council wants to bring to attention? Councillor Kroll.
I was just going to draw attention to, it's an item with respect to the youth parliament, which I believe is in December. I'd have to go back and look, but I just wanted to draw it to the attention of our youth councillor. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Evie, are you aware of that?
You're on mute.
Can you say that one more time about youth parliament?
There's a youth parliament. What I'll do, Evie, if it's okay with you, I'll pull the letter and forward it to you and see if it's something that might interest you.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, please do.
Thank you, Councillor Kroll. 9.2 is from Yara Detrina, the Small Business Program Manager for the Sunshine Coast Regional Economic Development Organization, SCREDO, and looking for a letter of support. A copy of a draft letter of support is in the file if council agrees with that. This is to be sent to BC Chamber of Commerce in support of SCREDO's funding for the Shop Sunshine Coast marketing campaign. Councillor Kroll, move that. Councillor Ladwig seconded it. All in favor of sending a letter of support? Thank you. Thank you. And, you know, they did a tremendous job on the business awards. As I say, you know, I took pictures of all the awards I handed out, and the pride of the group that at IGA that won a reward for the best grocery and the best, they were the best produce section, and the staff all got together, and I got a great picture of them all that I shared with Bob. So, but other smaller places were equally proud of being selected and recognized. So it's a great program. I really thank them for that. 9.3 is the letter from Mike Pedersen, Executive Director, Ministry of Forest Lands and Natural Resources, for the Modernizing of Forest Policy Engagement section. Now, this is going to be on November the 2nd from 2 to 4. And of course, November 2nd is a council meeting day, and we will be in committee from 3 o'clock. So if we can make that, if anybody can make that at 2 o'clock and maybe sit in for the first part of that conversation, I think it'd be helpful. You don't want to miss the meeting because we're once again going to be talking about contributions and amenity contributions, and we don't want to do it a third time. So hopefully we'll be able to get there. So 2 to 4, November 2nd, and forestry policy engagement session. Anything else under correspondence? Nothing. We'll go to 10.1 bylaws. This is zoning amendment bylaw number 1065-63 for Wright Road. And the report on that is starting on page 85. I think it's still 85. It might have changed. And this is the public hearing minutes. And I'll allow or ask our Director of Planning to introduce this.
Thank you, Mayor. This application, or this zoning amendment is for Wright Road. It's to rezone the property from the R3 zone to the residential cluster zone, the RCL zone. A public hearing was held on October 5th. And in the minutes, it says that there were 8 written submissions received from 10 individuals in opposition of the proposed bylaw, and 4 submissions received from 5 individuals in support of the proposed bylaw. And then at the public hearing, there were 8 attendees, and 4 of them spoke. 2 were in support of the application and 2 were opposed. So some of the comments received were support for the development from the Affordable Housing Society. One of the residents in Parkland subdivision had concerns about the single access to the neighborhood, but generally supported the drop of the rezoning on lot 38 because it's now just on lot 37. One person opposed the development who lives on Pratt Road and had concerns of the runoff, which was spoken to earlier in today's meeting. And then another person opposed, citing concerns of the carrying capacity of the town, and was concerned that the CAC contribution was not enough, and generally just opposed the development. So now it's up to council to decide on third reading. If council does approve third reading, then the next step would be to send the bylaw to the Ministry of Transportation for approval, and then to secure the CAC offer, so the financial contribution as well as the rental agreement would be registered on title before this comes back to council for adoption.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions, council, at this time on the report? Seeing none, would somebody care to move the recommendation? Councillor Kroll, seconded by Councillor Ladwig. Any further discussion? Councillor Lumley, you've had a chance to read the report? You're on mute.
I don't think I can vote on this one. I wasn't at the public hearing, so.
If you read the report, you can vote.
I have read the report.
Okay,
Yeah.
then you can vote.
Okay.
Which is a requirement, by the way. When you don't attend a public hearing, you can vote only after you've read the report.
Yeah, I thought I had to. Okay, my bad. I thought I would have to discuss the report with the planner, but if I can just read it, then I've already.
Yeah. Okay, Councillor Ladwig.
I think it's important that people understand that the density that's being approved on this rezoning application is less than what was originally approved.
In the overall subdivision.
Yes.
The overall neighborhood plan.
Exactly. People need to understand less.
That's correct. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to call the question. All in favor of the that the minutes of, well, first of all, let me step back for a second. First is that the minutes of the public hearing held October 5, 2021 to consider zoning amendment bylaw number 106563 be received. Firstly, Councillor Kroll, Councillor Ladwig, thank you. All in favor of that? Okay. And we had the Councillor Kroll and Councillor Ladwig also moved the zoning amendment bylaw be given third reading. All in favor of that? Yeah. Opposed? Okay, one opposed. You want that recorded, Councillor Diendrade?
Yes, that's okay. And I have expressed my reasons why before, but I will express again. I am concerned with increase in density. Until we get the report from Waterline really laying out how our aquifer is behaving, I feel very concerned because there has been a lot of development already approved and more on the go. So I am concerned right now.
Okay, thank you. So that's been approved for third reading. So the next step is referral to the ministry, and then we come back to us as next step. So Next item is the notice of motion I gave last week, and that was regarding reconsideration of resolution number R 2021-355 that was approved by council on September 21st. And this was to send a note to the owner of 718 North Road, suggesting that he apply for a extension to the variance temporary use permit that was offered, that was approved, and that we waived the $1,500 fee for that. And my concerns with that is I don't believe it's a good practice for us to move out ahead of a property owner. That if they want to apply for a temporary use permit, they should or extension of a temporary use permit, they should do that, provided for in the legislation. And we should not be waiving fees for property owners who can well afford to pay for a temporary use permit. And that the precedence of that in terms of any costs, any fees that people who can't afford it, we would require them to pay. We don't have kind of a hardship type provision on these things. So my recommendation is that that resolution be rescinded, and that it has not been acted upon. A letter has not been sent to the property owner, so there's been no action taken by staff as a result of that resolution. And the requirement is that it be brought back to council within 30 days and not be acted on. Now, I did give notice of motion within that 30-day period, and which is sufficient. We've done that before. So my recommendation is that that be reconsidered and that the resolution be withdrawn. Councillor Ledwig?
Are you?
Oh, I will move that the resolution be withdrawn and be reconsidered and withdrawn.
I'll second it.
Seconded. Thank you. Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, thank you. And I think it's just good practice. I'm not sure what the status of that is. I'm sure we can have that other conversation, but we have not seen anything come forward from that property owner. Councillor Kroll?
I would like at some point if we could have possibly included in the ramp up to budget of what it has cost the town in cleanup and one thing and another to deal with the rogue RVs that are parked around the community.
Well, I can tell you that I asked for that figure from staff, and it's about $2,800 we paid for cleanup for the RV that was behind the curling rink.
So perhaps
And
waiving the $1,500 fee was not out of
that would be for that RV is still parked on Park Road. But it
and there's garbage. There's probably going to be cleanup there as well.
I wouldn't be surprised. No. And that's what happens when we allow them to get established in a location. Okay, we'll go to our second inquiry section now, and we have just a few minutes. We have also a long in-camera session, so we'll go to our second inquiry section.
Yes, you have a couple of hands up.
Yep.
William Baker is joining you.
You're still muted, Mr. Baker?
Yes, there are those who would like to never unmute me, but nevertheless, Mayor Beamish and councillors, I continue to be concerned, as Councillor De Andrade is, of where we are as a town in terms of our capacity to grow and use our aquifer and continue developing. I mean, we've just gone through an approval basically an approval of more density in Park Road. And I have no issue with Park Road in particular. I have an issue though in not knowing where we are on the continuum of where do we go? Like, we're a small town. When do we hit capacity? How many houses are we able to construct? How many more new houses are we able to construct in this little town before we fall over the edge, before we have hit the capacity of our aquifer to be able to provide water and also our sewage system? So when will the town be publishing something that we as citizens can look at and discuss and have a conversation about? I know that there's a water line study going on. When do we get this? Because I think the sooner the better.
I think, Mr. Baker, what we do have is we do have the 2013 waterline study that identified a number, and it said basically about 7,500 population, and we are wondering if we're at 5,000 population. So that the update, we will hope will confirm that number and maybe expand that number, so that that's what we're looking for. But we're working within the comfort of the 2013 report, which was focused on 7,500.
Thank you, but that doesn't really address the issue of the available land in the town that can be developed. So does it mean that once we hit 7,500 people, we stop all development? I mean, I'm not sure how this...
that is focused on water. So if we don't have water to support development at that point in time, we will have to find, we'll go back to our friends in the regional district, and where we had zone 3 water for a number of years, we'll have more water again. So we will see. But that's where we are at this point in time. And hopefully we'll have that report from Waterline, as you say, in the spring, and it will confirm their original results or expand their original results or reduce their original results, because the SCRD is also going to be taking water from the aquifer. So we will see. We're looking forward to that.
Okay. I do have a second question with regards to something that the Director of Planning mentioned. The Director of Planning mentioned in terms of the Eagle View community amenities contributions, they provided something for Armor Beach, they provided something for the affordable housing, but she also mentioned that there was a potential contribution for a trail through Ingalls Forest. And I recall a meeting between myself and you, Mayor Beamish, where I suggested that perhaps the community wouldn't want to cut down trees to provide a trail through the forest. If that is the case, and if you indeed do consult with the community as promised, would you be able to, or would council be able to redirect the funds that would have been paid for that trail to other projects within the town?
Interesting concept. We've certainly looked at that. I'm not certain where that trail lies today, but when there's a commitment made, if the commitment does not have to be spent in this area, it could be spent in another area. It certainly is something we could look at, but I'm not going to anticipate that until down the road, but good question. Thank you.
Okay. I look forward to that discussion. Thank you.
And you have one other person with their hand raised.
Thank you.
Judith Bonkoff is moving over to speak.
Judith, you there?
Yeah, sorry, I had a few troubles with some buttons.
All right.
Good evening again, Mayor and Council. I'd just like to thank you for sending the CAC policy back to COW. I understand that you will never have a perfect policy and appreciate your efforts to get it right. I'm happy that you will finally get some comparison numbers and encourage you to seriously consider how meager the amounts that previous developments have paid. We thought they were meager, but they are way higher than what's coming. This leads me to one question. Is council going to look closer at the language in 4.1.4 and reword it to make it crystal clear that the town is the one who negotiates to gain more CACs when lift is concerned? Very important. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
If there's anyone else who wishes to speak to council, please raise your hand. I see no further hands raised, Mayor Beamish.
Okay, thank you very much. And we'll carry on to our next item is the motion to close the meeting. And this a recommendation the meeting be closed in accordance with sections 91A, E, and 92C of the Community Charter. Personal information, the acquisition, disposition, expropriation of land, or a matter being investigated by the Ombudsman Act. Councillor Ladwig, thank you. Councillor Crowell, all in favor, council? Okay, thank you very much. And thank you everybody for attending and participating tonight. We hope we were entertaining at least. And we will see you at our next meeting. Thank you very much. And council, you can stay online and we will come back to you. And what staff are we having here? Is a corporate officer?
Yes, myself and CAO Mark Brown.
Okay. Okay. I just wonder about the director of planning relative to that one issue.
Don't believe she's expecting to be here.
Okay.
And which issue was that? Was that with regard to, let me just check.
Gospel Rock.
Let me just get in touch with her.
Yeah, I don't know if council has any questions for the director of planning on that. She was very much involved with Gospel Rock. Whether we want to have her here or let her have the rest of the night off. Council, any thoughts? Do you have any questions for the director of planning? You're muted, Councillor D'Andrade, which is.
Sorry, I frankly was disappointed because I didn't have the time to read about the covenant. So for me, it really depends what the decision is going to be, right? Well, what council will decide how to move forward, because the only reference that I have is really the letter from SCCA that I had the opportunity to read. And I scanned the pictures of the research. Yeah, it was. The package was given very late, so I couldn't. So I'm not sure if we're gonna need her, but in case, perhaps.
Yeah.
Councillor Lumley?
I kind of agree. There's a lot of information to absorb when you read this, and you might want to read it again and maybe read it again. So I personally, I don't think I've had enough time to spend on this.
Okay.
To be able to
Well, then let's not worry about it. We'll get in the agenda and we'll just refer it to another meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, so we need to make sure that we're all locked away.
Okay, do we have 2 minutes break?
You can have 2 minutes break, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could I make an inquiry?
You can?
With respect to